Well, there's a proposal out there for a mining operation in the southeastern area of what we typically call the Okefenokee Swamp. It's not exactly in the National Refuge, it's just outside of it, along an area called the Trail Ridge that was probably once a barrier island and is very rich with titanium ore. And the group that wants to come in and do this has been working on this ridge down in Florida, and we've kind of seen some of the areas where the mining is taking place and not real happy with the results. What happens is they go in and they take the earth out, they'll process it, they render that earth sterile in the process, and then it goes back into where they dug it from. So the material is put back in, but once it goes back in there, it has a hard time sustaining life because of all the processing that's gone on with it. Now, inside of the swamp, in the refuge, lies Billy's Island. Billy's Island was the site of a logging town that was developed in the late 1800s to take out the cypress, pine, and hardwoods in the Okefenokee Swamp by train. Now, the Civilian Conservation Corps came in the 30s, and they dismantled the town, and so it has been almost 100 years since this place was left untouched and allowed to grow back to its natural state. So we decided to go out and kind of take a look at that and let that kind of be a barometer of what the earth would look like had it been stripped and then allowed to grow back. But keep in mind, it was just logged, and the ground wasn't stripped, and the earth wasn't rendered sterile. Now, Billy's Island is very well known, and it's visited by many people who come to the swamp. You can rent a boat up at the trading post and come out and kind of walk along and explore. And there's still a few little artifacts that are left around from the days of the CCC, the Conservation Corps, back when Franklin Delano Roosevelt was president of the United States, coming out of the Depression. This was part of one of those programs, work programs, to rehabilitate Billy's Island. So they came in and cleaned up all of the logging camp and tried to put it back to a natural state and allow it to grow back. And what we're going to do today is just kind of look around Billy's Island, and we're going to see what it looks like today a little bit and see the growth. Now, the thing to keep in mind is this ground was not stripped. It wasn't turned over and rendered sterile before the process. But Billy's Island was, from what we understand, was cleared of all timber. They got this timber off of this place, and what you're going to see here is what has basically grown back in 100 years. According to the timeline here on Billy's Island, logging camp was in place from 1918 to 1926, but we know the logging operation took place in the swamp a little bit earlier than that, maybe not exactly on Billy's Island, but we kind of give them the benefit of the doubt, kind of add some time there to it to understand what goes on, in 100 years or so of reclaiming nature in an area that was once smoothed over. Now, keep in mind, these trees, even today, they're kind of grown like an agricultural crop. They grow pine trees to be harvested into lumber and the paper products all over this area, and including on the fringes of the swamp. But the soil itself is it's not turned over and destroyed. And the potential for hydrological damage, moving the kind of material that they're going to be moving to process the ores they're looking for is certainly going to change compaction. It's going to change probably some water table rates, not to mention the watershed, all this water that goes into the swamp. The swamp gets its water from rain. That's what feeds the swamp, and then from there it drains out through the Swanee as well as the St. Mary's River. Swanee going to the Gulf of Mexico, and the St. Mary's to the Atlantic Ocean. And having this much material moved out of the area could have an adverse effect, and it may be something that we really need to consider. Now we can see here the pines have done very well. Of course, pine trees are a relatively fast-growing tree in this area as compared to say the hardwoods, and they have thickened out, and this area is now what I'd say kind of really in a natural state. There are prescribed burns that take place, and you can see that some of those trees that are in there, they're going away. That material is returning to the earth through the process of fire, and it's a natural part of the swamp ecology. When the mining starts, once it gets started, it's going to be, the toothpaste is out of the tube. You're not going to put that genie back into the bottle. And that's the unfortunate thing here. And I don't want to, and never have really considered myself an activist on the environmental front, but we're really close to some very sensitive areas here that could have some very adverse effects down the line for not only the immediate swamp area, but also the areas where those watersheds drain into and the materials that they move through the environment. The public was allowed an opportunity to have their input for this permitting process. That time is closed recently, and it's going to be up to the powers that be to see if this permit is granted in this area. Kind of hoping here on this one that this permit is maybe deferred, and again, I understand the need for these resources, but I certainly don't want to see the moon set on this swamp.